Hello, everybody, and good evening to episode 25 of Montague Island Books. Now, I'm delighted to say that our author guest tonight this is information I've taken from her bio just to give you a little bit of information, but she will obviously fill in all the gaps. Now, she made a crime fiction in the pandemonium, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Pandemonium of 2021. And she'd been published for 15 years and won a +4 of awards. She said, I've always loved writing for young readers, but for many years I harbored the dark secret of really wanting to murder people. She says, happily, only in print. Well, as far as the authorities know, so we'll let her discuss that more. Having dispatched quite a few characters in her best-selling Shapeshifter series, she'd always nursed the urge to take it up a gear for her readers outside of school and college. And the cancellation of scores of festival and school event bookings in 2020 provided that silver lining: time. She said, it's been hideous for so many people, and I wouldn't wish a global pandemic on anyone, obviously, but the extra time has finally allowed me to scratch that crimey itch. Henry and Sparrow is the result. Now, before becoming an author, she worked as a reporter in local newspapers and later as a BBC broadcast journalist and a comedy writer for BBC Radio 4. And prior to all of this, she was a bit of a lovey and a singer in bands. And her experience in all these fields has provided a rich background tapestry for the Henry and Sparrow series. She lives in Hampshire, England, with her husband, occasional boomeranging offspring, I love that, occasional boomeranging offspring, and a highly porous labradoodle who loves too much. She likes to go running, not quite so often in the woods since writing The Dying Dolls, and that is taken from a website. So I'm very pleased to welcome A.D. Fox, also known as Ali Sparks. Hello, Ali. Good evening.
Very pleased to be here and honoured to be your quarter century as well.
Hello.
Quarter of the way through to the 100, obviously you're planning to get done before the end of the year.
Maybe not before the end of the year, but we'll get there eventually. So say it's lovely to have you with us and joining us on the island for this, as you say, this 25th session. So perhaps you can tell us a little. Obviously, I've got the bio from your website, but perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the books. And I know today is quite an important day for you, so perhaps you can tell everybody about that as well.
It is, because this is the day that we've launched the 4th in the Henry and Sparrow series, Death Circles. And I waved this at you, but sort of slightly quickly, because this is my uncorrected proof. My proper version was supposed to arrive in the post today and hasn't got here yet. So I've got all the other 4 of the series. Yeah, Henry and Sparrow, it's crime fiction, but it's sort of slightly odd crime fiction in that I've got a female detective, DS, and then later DI, Kate Sparrow, but she ends up buddying up with a dowser called Lucas Henry, whom she gets in to help her find some missing women, basically, in Dying Dolls, the first book of the series. She's trying to find who's taking these women when they're out running in remote areas, and so she gets Lucas Henry involved, without telling him that she knows about his past. He hasn't made the connection between him and her, but she knows about him because many years ago, her sister disappeared and her sister's best friend was killed, and they're pretty sure that her sister's dead too. And Lucas Henry was their friend and used his dowsing to find the body of Zoe, the girl who was found dead. So there's this history between them. So basically, Kate's sister is the connection between her and Lucas, but she doesn't mention that when she asks him to help her out, because it would be very complicated.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, over the series of 4 books, this background, this history comes back to haunt them both in all kinds of pretty devastating ways.
Great, wonderful. So what got you on to, obviously, as you explained in the bio about how you sort of moved from writing for you sort of young adults to crime, but what got you onto the dowsing element? Is that an interest you have yourself, or where did
It
that
is
come from?
actually. It is. I'm just going to get my dowsing pendulum now, which is not to say that I use it very often, and I'm not a dowser, but I've had this, as part of my research. I actually thought about doing this book a long time ago, and it was inspired by a situation I had when I was working for the BBC. I was, as well as doing bits and pieces for Radio 4, writing bits and pieces of comedy, I was working at my regional radio station, BBC Radio Solent. And I used to do a magazine for the station, as well as doing bits and pieces on air. I ran a magazine about the station and about the presenters and about some of its listeners. And one of our presenters is a guy called Mike Powell, who's brilliant. You'll hear him on national radio from time to time. He crops up on Radio 4 in the World Service and Radio 2. And Mike was doing this thing called Mike's Mysteries. And he loved to look into spooky and unusual stuff. And so we went, as partly for the magazine, to interview a dowser, this amazing guy who was down in Dorset. And so I went along to basically record the interview and then do a transcript version of it for the magazine. And I had my big Nikon F5 camera with me. This is kind of pre-digital, great old beast of a camera. And so I sat there and I watched Mike interviewing and speaking to this guy. And then the guy said to me, take your car keys out and go and hide them somewhere, and I'll show you dowsing. I'll find your keys for you. And so I was, fair enough. So off I went. And it's quite a rural area that we were in. It was in this little bungalow up a grassy farm track in a very rural part of Dorset. And so I went out to the front of the bungalow, and Mike and this guy, Ron, I think his name was, they were in the back looking over the grounds. He really physically couldn't possibly see where I was. And so I went up the alleyway in the sort of grassy track, and then I turned round again and I went the other way. And then I hid my keys under this, I just noticed a leaf, and I hid them under a leaf, and I'd sort of memorized where they were, went back into the house. And sure enough, out comes this lovely dowser guy, and he starts dowsing. He used rods at this point, and he's walking along the track, and he turns right, not left where my keys was, but right, following the path that I'd originally taken. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be awful. I'm going to have to write this article and somehow write it in a way that doesn't embarrass him because he's not finding my keys. And this guy walks up this track, stops bang on where I stopped, turns around, starts walking back again. And I'm thinking, this is interesting. Now, at this point, I should tell you, Joe, that I had my camera right in front of my face. And like I say, it's a massive old Nikon F5, which any photographers watching will know is a beast, completely hiding my face. So there was no way this guy, even if he was looking at me, which he wasn't, he couldn't be reading my expression. I don't think he could even read my body language because I'm holding this camera and I'm just following him. And then all of a sudden he stops dead, looks down, his toe is right by the leaf. The keys aren't revealed, but I know they're under this leaf. I'm so staggered, I don't say a word. And he goes, not here. Oh, okay, then I'll carry on. And I had to go, stop, no, look under that leaf. And there they were. And it was absolutely staggering because I'd interviewed other people with Mike, sort of various people who I describe as a little bit wifty-wafty in a very loving way. They had ideas and they purported to be mediums and various things. And they might have been, but they didn't really convince me. But this guy just blew me out of the water.
Wow.
So that was really my inspiration for Lucas.
That was great. And is it something, obviously, with doing 4 books, you've obviously done a lot of research. Is it something that's still used by the police, or?
This is the interesting thing. So that was a few years back. And when I started researching doing this book, which I actually began about 7 years ago, I was very interested in it. I spoke to dowsers. I went to the dowsing, I think it's the Dowsing Association, British Association of Dowsers, or something very similar to that. And
British
spoke to one
Association of Dowsers sounds bad, BAD.
Bad, yeah. It's something like BDA, British Dowsing Association, I think it is, BDA. Bad would be cool. And so I spoke to one of their guys and met up with him for lunch. And he said to me, yes, the police do use our help, but you'll never hear about it officially. for the very reason that Lucas doesn't want to do it either. And that's because dowsers have helped to find things, bodies, people. And the minute they do that, they're considered a prime suspect, because how would they know where that body is if they didn't have some knowledge of what was going on? So even when they're brought in by the police, they have to be, they're on the consultants list, and they have to be very, very careful about how they do it so that they don't incriminate themselves. And this is a genuine thing, apparently, and as genuine as the other element that is in Lucas's story, that dowsers genuinely do get hired by building companies and similar to map the lie of the land where the watercourses are, so that the builders can avoid building on areas where it's likely to flood or sink. That's a genuine thing. So it's a business. So it's not really all that new age and spiritual. It's an innate talent that apparently everybody can learn to do it. You can do it, Joe. I can do. Apparently I could do it probably right now this evening. Whether I want to put myself through this, I don't know. But what we used to do when we were kids, I don't know if you ever played this game, is we'd sit around the table after dinner on a Saturday evening with a needle on a bit of thread and just hold it and then just let it start moving. And then we'd ask questions. And for me, it would be, I'd say circle for yes and rock for no. And I'd get asked questions. My mum would ask me questions about her day at work, things that I couldn't possibly know. And I would just ask the pendulum to tell me yes or no. She'd say, did I meet so-and-so today? And it'd be yes or no. So just like that. And it was spooky the number of times it was right. I would say it was up in the 90%, how often it was
strange,
right.
Isn't it? It is something unexplainable, isn't it? It's just...
Have a go, Joe. Seriously, get yourself. You don't have to have something like this. You can just use a needle and thread, or a wing nut on a bit of cotton. Just focus your minds and then just ask some questions, and then sort of you basically prime it by asking it questions that you kind of know the answer to, and then you start asking it questions you don't know the answer to, and then you look up later and find out how right it was. It's
brilliant.
Really spooky. I'm a skeptical journalist as well. That's my background. So I'm not given to believing anything, but this really is fascinating. I love it.
Brilliant. Love the connection there. So what, you say you've got the 4th book coming out today. So is that the end of the series, or are you writing more, or what's the...
It's the end of the story arc of this series. I mean, basically, when I write these books, I don't want to just keep rolling the same issues on forever. It's a bit like writing a season of a Line of Duty or whatever. So you will have issues that continue right through every season, but you'll have other issues which get resolved at the end of that season. So you have a story within that. So there's a story arc that travels from the Dying Dolls to Dead Air, set in a radio station, very much ploughing through my past, to 7 Deadly Things, set in a holiday camp, another place I worked, and then finally Death Circles. So throughout these 4 books, the characters of Henry and Sparrow kind of, they get tangled up more and more in their past, and they have to find out what really happened to Mabel and Mabel's friend Zoe 17 years prior to when we meet them. So that is resolved by the end of the first 4 books. And I know what I'm like. I know I need a little break now. So I'm working on some other stuff. I'm working on some children's fiction this summer. And then I'm working on a new crime novel in the autumn, which is connected to Lucas, Henry and D.I. Kate Sparrow's world, but not in their world for the whole book. So I'm going to work on that for a while, and then I will return. I can't leave them alone now, because I'm getting some wonderful response from the readers saying, we want to know what happens next. And although things are resolved at the end of book 4, there's also some stuff that's left set up for the next series. Everyone's going, what? So this is exactly what I was hoping for.
So you're as hooked as the readers, so that's great. And also, you just mentioned something that we've actually got a mutual connection in that we both work, because I was reading, I think you're on your website, we both work for Pontins.
No, you did too. Which one were you at?
I was in the call centre when it used to be in Charlie in Lancashire. I only did about 6 months or so, but we were taking we weren't actually on a resort. We were taking sort of holiday bookings and or doing all the sun offers and all that.
Well, I was at the Pontins Pakefield
Yeah.
in south, just quite south of Lowestoft, which is, if you read the Seven Deadly Things, this is, if you look at the cover, you can see that it's very much based. That beach there is very similar to an East Coast beach, with the wartime fortifications they put in the bunkers. So anybody who knows East Anglia will know there's a lot of bunkers on the beaches along East Anglia, so, and that's quite a pivotal part of the plot in this. So yes, this is so I've called it Buntins. So some of you Butlins and Pontins, and there are various stories that I relate through that, which really did happen to me back in, oh crikey, mid 80s, when I was there as a in my late teens as a bluecoat. I loved it, I have to say. It was great for me.
Yeah, I think everybody who's done that kind of a job, although at the time it might be never ending, you know, they could, when you look back at it, they've enjoyed it so much. I actually went at a weekend. It was a 60s weekend at Pakefield many years ago. It must have been about probably about 15 years ago, and it was brilliant. It was just one of them where, you know, it just chalet accommodation, but it was great. It was like all the acts from the 60s, and it was packed, you know. And obviously that, as you know, as you were saying about, you know, your school visits and whatever, obviously the campsites have been, you know, blown apart really by the goings on over the last 18 months or so, but hopefully they're starting to get back now. But yeah, I thought it made me laugh when I was reading your bio, and I thought, Pontins, now there's a connection. So we know what's happening on the book. So if people need to contact you, obviously you've got the website, www.adfoxfiction.com. What about social media? Where can people get in touch with you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, AD Fox. You can find me on Twitter. I am on Instagram as well. I live mostly on Facebook. I'm not quite so good at the other ones. But you can definitely find me there and go and like the page. That would be wonderful. And yeah, adfoxfiction.com is the website. And if you're liking the sound of what you hear and you want to have a little freebie taster, there is a free prequel, about 11,000 word story called Undertow, which you can just go to the website and just click and get a free prequel. So you can try before you buy and see if you like the look of it. Like the sound of it.
That's great. So that's all the ways of contacting you. And I presume all the books are available in the usual places, Amazon, Waterstones, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, my AD Fox Fiction is a direct to Kindle publication, so that is Amazon. My alter ego of Ali Sparks, writing for children, it obviously is everywhere. It's Waterstones and all the indies and all the usual places you would find the children's fiction as well.
Great. Well, hopefully lots of people will visit your website and have a look, and as you say, download the little sort of teaser, and then get more into the book. So what we'll do now is we'll get prepared to whisk you off to Montague Island. Now, for anyone who's watching this for the first time that maybe doesn't really understand how this works, think of desert island discs, but for books. Montague Island is an island set off the coast of Cumbria, and it was invented, I suppose you could say, by Mike Craven, M.W. Craven, in one of his books. It was, you know, it came up quite a bit, this Montague Island, but it's a fictitious island that he kind of sort of invented. So that's where we get the idea. So you go along to the island, you get stranded on there, you've got 7 books with you and a variety of other things. And we will have a look now and see what you have chosen to take along with you. So what is your first book that you're going to put in your suitcase?
Okay, the first one has to be 5 Go to Smuggler's Top by Enid Blyton. And this is because this is the book that changed my life. Because when I was at school, I was actually a really slow reader, and it took me a long time to catch up with the other kids. I was in school it would have been 1970 I first went to school, and where I went to school in Southampton, for some reason they had this strange, weird new way of teaching kids to read. They messed with the alphabet basically. So instead of learning like I expect anybody watching this did, just A, B, C, D by rote, We got something a bit different. Every letter of the alphabet got its own special name, its own special color, and its own special action. So
Wow.
instead of the letter M, instead of just M, we got three-legged orange. And instead of F, we got floppy lilac. And instead of I, we got pink with a dot on the top. So as you can see, it was very confusing and complicated. And in common with pretty much everyone else in my year, I failed to learn the alphabet and failed to learn to read for quite some time.
Wow.
So when I went to a new school when I was 6, where they did the ordinary teaching, everybody was ahead of me and I was a real struggler for a long time. And then I was down in the library with my brother and sister, just doing arts and crafts and things, as libraries do. We know they do other things than just books. And I picked up this book, started reading it, didn't stop. And from that point onwards, the lights all went on and I became a reader. So that is basically the most pivotal book for me from when I was a child. So
Definitely.
That would be.
And I think there's so many others as well, all that kind of, that series, so many people, that's what got them into reading,
Yeah, because there were so many to work through. So that was brilliant.
Yeah, great choice.
The next one.
Yeah, go on. What's your next one?
I'm not going to do them in any particular order.
Yeah,
actually,
fine.
I'm just going to pull out another one. I'm going to combine a couple of them because where I went next, actually, after Enid Blyton, was to other authors, and Joan Aiken was, for me, one of the best authors I read when I was a kid. And so The Wolves of Willoughby Chase is probably her most popular one. Lots of people will be going, oh yeah, Wolves of Willoughby Chase, it's brilliant. And this is a fantastic book. But the one that really spoke to me was The Whispering Mountain, set in Wales. Absolutely adore this story. And she does something which I now do, which she connects her universes. So there'll be little characters wandering through from one book to another. So there's characters in Wolves of Willoughby Chase that pick up with the characters in the Dido Twite series. Black Hearts in Battersea and Nightbirds of Nantucket connect with the Wolves of Willoughby Chase. And I think there might even be a connection to The Whispering Mountain. And that, I really loved the way she did that. And virtually everything I write, nearly everything has got a connection to something else that I've written, which you'd only know if you've read the others. It's not important, but it's a way of weaving little threads between your books and creating your own universe. And
how do you manage to do that, to be able to remember it? Do you are you a planner, a plotter or a pantser, or to be able to link that into sort of different genres as well as sort of different series? How do you manage to?
I don't really, I'm not a big plotter, I have to say. I'm one of those writers who tends to sort of think about an idea for a while and then just jump in and see where it goes. This is the kind of thing that makes people groan at me sometimes, but it does seem to work for me most of the time. I found writing crime fiction, I've had to get my plotting head out a little bit more. It does ask for more plotting, but again, I still say mostly it's sort of just mulches around in my head, and I sort of work it out as I go along. And then obviously I'll go back on a second draft and I put a bit of underpinning here and I can stick a bit there that relates to something that's coming later. And that's the way I tend to work. And actually, I've not found it difficult at all to connect between the books. I'll be writing something and I suddenly think, oh yeah, this puts me in mind of, I can put a reference in there. So it's quite fun to do. And it's nice when your readers pick up on it and say, it's one in so. So if readers of the Henry and Sparrow series, right from book 1, The Dying Dolls, will notice there is reference to a character called Archie, Archibald Tozer, who is going to be the tabloid hack who's in my next crime fiction book that I'll be writing which I've already written about half of, but I'll be carrying on with that in September. And Archie is a rather unconscionable, sleazy tabloid hack with really appalling morals, who has the tables turned very suddenly on him, and he becomes the subject of the news and is chased around by the paparazzi himself and wanted for murder. And that it was easy to connect him into Kate's world, because I knew that he had started out as a local newspaper reporter, and I thought, why not the Salisbury Journal, where Kate Kate's from Salisbury, and I as a newspaper reporter myself in the South, I know people at the Salisbury Journal, so it all connects in really nicely. So I don't find it too difficult. The only thing is, if you go back some time later, so for example, my Shapeshifter series as a children's author as Ali Sparks, that came out. First one was out in 2006, and then more recently I wrote a series called Night Speakers, which has connections with Shapeshifters. I had to pause every so often and go back and reread what I'd written a long time ago, and you do forget stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's brilliant. That's great to thought that you put it all together. So that it was books 2 and 3 we've got. So what's the 4th book you've got?
4th would be Must Try Harder, by Paula Maguire. I only encountered this book a couple of years ago when I was at Wigton Festival up in Scotland, and Paula is this amazing woman, is a Glaswegian, and I met her because I was doing the audiobook of one of my children, young adult fiction stories called Carjacked, and one of my characters is a Glaswegian, and I knew that I had to somehow do an accent, a Glaswegian accent, and I didn't want to be utterly awful at it, and I knew I was not going to be great at it, but I didn't want to be terrible at it. So I'd asked the wonderful Anne Barclay at Wigtown Festival to see if she knew of anybody who was going to be there while I was there, who had a Glaswegian accent, who would help me out. And Paula was there, and so she did help me out. So through Paula, if you ever listen to Carjacked on audio and it's me reading, you'll hear that I can say girl rather than girl, and and just say things that don't sound so horribly Southern. So that was wonderful to meet her to do that, and she was incredibly helpful. But this book that she's written is extraordinary because she had incredible anxiety as a child, just so terrible that she could hardly do anything for most of her life, and then she got to a point where she just thought, I can't do this anymore. And she set herself a task of doing something scary every day. Wow. And so she's decided to learn all 17 of the sports that were running in the Commonwealth Games that year and make herself do them. She was swimming in the sea, she was skiing, she was doing all these incredible things. She even did some naked life modeling. So she stripped off for artists to paint her. This is somebody who was so shy she couldn't go and sit in a cafe on her own. Wow. So it's absolutely extraordinary. And if you've ever suffered from any panic attacks or anxiety in your life, and I have, then this is such a heartfelt read. And she's also a very good writer. It's not just a diary of her life. It's very beautifully written as well. So I highly recommend this one, Must Try Harder by Paula Maguire. And that's why.
And what a woman to do all that. It's like, wow. Not to have just done it, but then to write about it as well. It's like, yeah, so that's great. So that's Must Try Harder. So great book. And number 5, what's your 5th book?
My 5th book would be another children's fiction, would be Mortal Engines by Philip Reeve. Some people watching may realize that it was recently made into a film by the same guy who did all the Lord of the Rings. His name has just fallen out of my head, which is ridiculous. But so he made a motion picture of it, which I did not watch because I couldn't cope with the idea of somebody else taking that universe and Hollywoodizing it. And it was, I could see from the trailers, it was really Hollywooded up. There'll be a lot of people who have read this. It was a Blue Peter Book Award winner, and it's just extraordinary. It's got the best opening line ever. I'm just going to have to show you.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
It was a dark, blustery afternoon in spring, and the city of London was chasing a small mining town across the dried-out bed of the old North Sea. Ooh. Yeah, that's brilliant. I run courses for young writers, and this is always one that I say when we talk about opening lines. I say, how about this one for size? And Philip, I know Philip as well. He's an absolutely charming and wonderful man, and so that really helps too. And I've read several of his books, but this is the one that I thought when I read it, I'm going to have to find that man and poison him, because otherwise I can never overtake.
Yeah.
But I do really, really love his stuff.
That sounds great. So Mortal Engines, great. And what is book number 6?
Book number 6 is another one which is young adult fiction. I'd say it's kind of year 6 upwards. And I should stress that all these books that I'm holding up, with the possible exception of the famous 5, because it's of a certain time and a certain era, are all really good reads for adults too. I think you shouldn't decide that because a book has got children as characters in it that it's not worthy of adult reading. These really are. This is written by Andrew Norris, another author friend of mine, but that's not the reason why I'm waving it, because this would have been on my top 5 regardless. It's aimed at, I would say, year 7 upwards. Jessica's Ghost. It's about a boy who doesn't fit in, who's at secondary school, who wants to be a fashion designer, but he doesn't think anybody else in his secondary school would understand that. So he's not going to share that information with anybody, and he's having a pretty tough time. And then a girl walks across the playground towards him, looking rather cool, actually, in what she's wearing. And they start talking about her clothes. And then it becomes evident that she's a ghost. She hardly knows that she is. And so the book explores why she's a ghost, what happened to her. And it meets various other characters who are also a little bit out of sync with life, who are not really very happy because they don't feel that they fit for various reasons. And by the end of the book, we find out what happened to Jessica, why she's a ghost, why she's hanging around. And it's beautifully written and really, really moving. And I love all of Andrew's work. I've read virtually everything he's ever written, but this one for me is top. And I think it's a really good read for year 7s. And for, I mean, younger possibly, it depends on the child, but it does tackle some fairly deep grown-up themes, but in a way that anybody could get and understand. It's very emotional. It probably will make you cry, but it's so worth it. And I think any adult should read this, and certainly any teachers who are working with kids, it's worth having this in your library, because you will see those kids and you will think, you need to read this book. This book is going to help you. So that's
great. That's a great advert for a book as well. And I get what you're saying about the the young adult books being good for older people as well, because there is a thing with genres in that people will say, oh, I don't like crime until they've read one, or I don't like, I had a thing about I didn't like novellas, and then I was reviewing one, doing like an advanced review copy, and they said, oh, have a read of this, and I loved it, and so that's got me into novellas. So I think sometimes it's good to just not think too much about the genre or the size of a book or whatever. And also you get people who say, well, I don't like YA, young adult fiction, but I loved Harry Potter.
It depends what type you've tried. I mean, I used to say I didn't really like crime. Can you believe it? But then I got into book 7, Christopher Brookmyre.
Oh, that was good timing, wasn't it?
Absolutely love Christopher Brookmyre. But I guess what it is Brookmyre, and he's a big influence on my style of writing. I'm really more into thriller, crime, fast-paced action adventure thriller crime is my cup of tea, and that's the way that I write. Yeah. There is some procedural in my books because Kate is a detective. Yeah. And I respect the procedural, and I like to see the authenticity in it. And I've very much done my best with research. I have a retired police inspector who helps me out on all of it. She's brilliant.
Great.
But I like pace, and I don't like things to slow down too much. That is my style, and this is very much what Christopher Brookmyre is about. I also like humor, and as you may have mentioned earlier, I used to write comedy for Radio 4, so my books do have a seam of comedy in. Every book I ever write has a seam of comedy in, because I can't help it, and also because I think as human beings, that's what our lives are like. Even in the midst of really dark, grim stuff, there is comedy, and you'll find this in a lot of crime writers, of course. Christopher Brookmyre is one. Alex Smith is another one. Alex is somebody who's also another friend of mine, but also I think we have some similarities in the way that we write. He's written a book called Paper Girls and a whole series around D.I. Cat. DCI Ket, which is doing really well too. So there is that connection. Another one that I would say is similar, Linwood Barclay on the American crime thriller writing as well. He tends to have characters who are police or ex-police, but there's lots of other characters too, and it's very, very pacey. And so this one, I love, again, I've read everything Christopher's written, except possibly bar one. I'm a bit behind, but this is probably my favorite, the Attack of the Unsinkable Rubber Ducks, which
Great title.
with guys who work in magicians and illusionists, and the people who misuse those skills as well. So I absolutely love this one. So if you like a bit of satire, a bit of comedy, a bit of it can be a bit political sometimes, it's gritty, it's often Glaswegian or based in Edinburgh, and it's a cracking read. All of his stuff is, and audiobooks are also very good if you're into those as well.
Great. So, and as you say, and I think in crime, because there's that much murder and that much sort of badness going on, for want of a better word, I think it is great when they put a bit of humour in. Mike Craven tries to do it a little bit, and Stuart McBride is another one who's like, you know, gets the humour in, and it really just like it lifts the story, and you know, you realise that, as you say, no matter how bad a situation is, there's always some little bit of humour in there, you know, to bring it alive. But great book choices, really interesting, all different, and books that I haven't, well, apart from the first one, the books I haven't heard of before, so that's great. So you've got all your 7 books packed away, you're all ready to go, and they're going to keep you busy for a while, I would imagine. So we believe that on the island, on this mystical island, or fantasy island, there is about an hour a day of electricity. So you're allowed to take a CD with you. Now, a CD can be it can be like an audiobook recording, it can be music, whatever, on you know, in CD format. So what would you take?
I would take Madness, Rise and Fall, because it takes me right back to the 80s when I got it for my 16th birthday, and I got the proper big LP, and I wish I could show it to you now, but I can't find it. I don't know where it is. I'm hoping it's in the attic or something somewhere. There's lots of Best of Madness that you can get. So, and a lot of people, you know, today, even young people, will be familiar with Madness's greatest hits. The Rise and Fall album had lots of hits on it, but it had some lesser songs as well, like Primrose Hill. And I just loved it. And it takes me back to a time which is wonderful, but also very itchy, because on my 16th birthday, I was in the middle of a really nasty bout of chicken pox.
Oh dear.
So I was home, I was off school. I was so bad, I was off, because as many people will know, when you get chicken pox later in life, it's much, much worse. And I was absolutely covered in itchy bumps, and to have baths in bicarbonate of soda and walking around dressed in very drapey, floaty things so that it didn't touch. And every time, this is back when those Atari games came out, you didn't have proper consoles, but you had an individual game like Space Invaders, and you'd have on a little plastic thing. Do you remember that?
I do.
And I used to play the Atari game, and every time I kind of went at something, my whole system went like, and every bump on my body shrieked with pain. But I remember the calming effect of hearing this Madness album, Rise and Fall. There was Mr. Speaker on it, there was Primrose Hill, and just some wonderful tracks that I adored. And so that is the one, Madness, Rise and Fall, that I would
and
go
still as popular as ever. And obviously there was, what was it, a couple of years ago, there was the Queen's, was it birth centenary, not centenary, anniversary, or or some, or a birthday, and they obviously did the concert at Buckingham Palace and what have you, which brought them a lot of new fans. So they are just a band that just keeps.
They keep on rolling, and they're so talented as well. And the keyboardist in particular was a classically trained pianist, and you can hear that in a lot of the stuff they do. Very, very, very clever, an excellent drummer, and the horns quite rough when they started out, and just got better and better and better.
Yeah.
And they've all got a wonderful character as a band too.
And when you're on the island, you'll be able to get up dancing, and you'll be able to enjoy the album all over again. So yeah, I like that choice of album. Now you also get to take along a DVD. Now a DVD can be, it can be a film, or it can be a TV series, or concert footage. So what DVD would you take?
Well, I was really torn with this because on the one hand, I might have a collection of videos by my son's band, Tirade, because it would be just nice to be able to see him singing his various songs. But then I suppose if I had a gadget with me, I might be able to find them on YouTube. I definitely
no
would.
internet.
No, I can't have Tirade, and they haven't actually done a full proper DVD yet, so no, I won't have Tirade. But so it would have to be a movie, and I think for me, and again, it's really difficult to choose. There's so many that I would like, but I think I'll probably go for Local Hero. Which have you watched Local Hero, Joe?
Don't think so. No, I'm not really a big film buff, but I do
right.
the bell that
if
one.
You get
Tell
a
us
chance,
about it. Yeah.
It's worth a watch. It's wonderful. It's set in Scotland, and it's the story of an American who has to go over and research a little area of coastline that Knox Oil and Gas in America want to buy up and convert to a gas refinery and station. So basically, he's been sent to negotiate with all the villagers of this utterly beautiful and charming little Scottish coastal village, to negotiate with them to sell up the beach so that they can basically come in and take it over and drill for oil, off-sea oil, and create a whole refinery centre. But while he's there, he slowly falls under the spell of this beautiful, beautiful place, and it makes it harder and harder for him to actually convince everybody to sell it. And you've got wonderful characters in it that you meet in this little Scottish village. The music is done by Dire Straits, the guy from Dire Straits, whose name is Stuart Knopfler. That's the one.
Mark Knopfler.
So he's done the music for it. So quite a lot of it people would recognise, actually, the themes from Local Hero. You recognise the music is absolutely magical, particularly the music set around the Northern Lights as they show up. And it's a very, very funny movie and a very moving movie. And I think most people who see it just the once just love it. It's highly recommended. I think it's the kind of thing, definitely a good thing to watch if you were recovering from COVID, because it completely out yourself and just make you feel so much better.
Sounds great. I will definitely check that out. I've made a note of it, so I'll definitely have a look for that one, because it does sound very interesting, and just the kind of thing that you'd need on an island, just to sort of give you that boost. So you're also allowed to take with you, and as I say, this is a fantasy island, so it can be a kind of reoccurring meal or food, but a favorite food ingredient or a favorite meal. So what would you choose to take?
This is quite tricky because we've very recently done the vegan thing. So we have become literally the lunch guests from hell. I found it actually really interesting to do. And we're the kind of vegans who occasionally will go, we'll slip into vegetarianism for the day if there's nothing. So if I just slip into vegetarianism for the day, I might have to go for lemon meringue pie, which I can make myself, and it is pretty good, if I do say so myself. A slightly warm lemon meringue pie is the best.
Nice.
I haven't figured out how to make it without eggs. So yeah, I think I would have to just, I'm on an island, it's crisis point. I'll have an egg. In fact, I've decided there will be some wild hens on the island, free range and extremely happy, who won't mind offering up their eggs. So that gets me out of any guilt. So I'll have ultimate free range eggs from beautiful and happy hens.
Yeah.
And then I'll have all the other ingredients, and I can make my own lemon meringue pie.
Brilliant choice. I like that one.
For an hour, simultaneously listening to Rise and Fall or watching Local Hero.
Great. Good, sounds like a good evening, actually. Yeah, so I love that one. And finally, we have your luxury item now. As I say, because it's a fantasy island, it can be anything. We've had some weird and wonderful choices over the last 24 shows. So, what would you take as your luxury item?
I can find it now that you've said this. I've thought about this a lot, and I've thought about this a lot over the years.
A
If I'm stuck on
recorder.
an island, I want to do something that I wouldn't normally have time to do, and it would be this. It would be to improve my recorder playing.
Wow.
Because, you know, I can do a little bit
Go on,
of
give us a tune.
See, I need to work on it, don't I? The
Good
reason
attempt, though. Good attempt.
normally a smaller one, and I forgot the way to put my fingers. But I would love to do this. I would love to
Yeah.
improve my recorder playing. And
Recorder, yeah.
if you've got plenty of time, there was a time in my life where I did work on it a bit, and I got quite good. But I've just let it go, you know. So I do.
Great idea. I love it. I love the idea because, as you say, it's something that you always think, well, yeah, one day I'll give it another go, but you never do. But as you say, you know, if you're stuck away on an island off the coast of Cumbria and there's not a lot going on, then good as time as any to learn how to play the recorder. So I've loved all your choices. They've been very different but very good, and been you know, really sort of great choices that you've chosen to take with you. So we hope you will have a happy time on the island. So just find, yeah. So, you know, hopefully you'll get rescued. Yeah. So do you just want to, for anyone who's coming late or listening to this late, just give us a reminder about your books, and where people can get hold of you.
Yes, you can find all the information you need about the Lucas and Henry series, about my detective meeting a dowser to help us solve crimes. You can go to adfoxfiction.com, and then you can get free prequel, or you can just find out about the books and go through to Amazon and get those. And at the moment, the first one of the series is just down to 99p for the month of August,
Right.
by way of celebration of the whole series being finished. So yes, The Dying Dolls is the first one.
Wonderful. And just a reminder where they can contact you on Facebook.
Just go for AD Fox Fiction, I think. If you just AD Fox Fiction on Facebook, you should find me fairly easily.
Yeah, and the website was adfoxfiction.com, wasn't it? That's right. So great. Well, thank you very much, Ali, for coming along this evening, and have a great time on the island, learning the recorder again and reading all those books and having the madness party. And it's been great having you, and good luck on publication day today, and we look forward to the new book when that comes along as well.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Joe. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.